I knew inside I was done. I was drained. I was drug out. There's an underbelly to bodybuilding and fitness
Yeah.
and Hollywood. And when you mix them all, you can get lost and go down a rabbit hole.
So welcome to the True Man Podcast with Mike Van Pelt. This is an invitation to radical reconstruction of a man's masculine heart and soul in a place of safe community where we dare to ask questions deep-seated inside a man and explore ways to help you become a better man, a better dad, and a better spouse. Well, thanks for joining me on the show and listening. I sure appreciate all my great listeners out there. You know, I think today's True Man Podcast is going to pump you up. No, seriously. Well, more about that in a minute. So listen, part of being the best man you can be, I'm convinced, is being both mentally and physically in good health. And I'm also a big believer, of course, that you better have your spiritual life in order. And I'm sure today's guest agrees with that. So welcome to the podcast, Tom Touchstone. Now, he is a content creator and consultant across the corporate, religious life, and fitness industries. And I'm willing to bet we're going to hear some interesting stories today from his bodybuilding days and his faith journey. Tom, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Mike, it's such a pleasure to be on with you. And it's such a awesome a privilege and honor to be on your show. I love it. I consume your content. I love the gambling addiction show with your friend that spoke to my heart. So I tell your viewers, go out and watch Mike's content. He does a great job. You know, I love just when I saw what you did, I threw out a pitch to you just to be on your show, because I do believe there is a true man. And I do believe in what you said, because I think the Bible says it is body, soul, and spirit. And I don't think until you have those three together, you're not a complete man. People think we are.
Oh, no. Listen, I see people all the time. It's been one of my blessings in my life to be involved in men's small group and go on these retreats. And you see men all the time. They show up and the tank's on E. They said they show up and the tank's on empty, and they leave knowing that they had a great opportunity to hear the voice of God and fill their tank. But enough of that. Let's get on with you. Now, listen, Tom, wow, you've got an incredible background. You know, listen, man, Tom was a professional bodybuilder. And the 1985 Mr. California and a runner-up to Mr. USA in 1986. That's badass. There's a true man right there. So, Tom, talk with us about how did all that get started?
You know, one of the things people ask me, because the 80s were the golden years of bodybuilding. Yeah. I walked into Gold's Gym when I was 18-year-old because I graduated. My dad told me that I either paid rent here in Bakersfield, California, or I could go someplace else and print. I wasn't a smart guy, didn't get a lot of good grades. I was more of a jock when I was in high school, but an injury forced me to get a focus on real life, which I wasn't prepared for. But I did tell my dad that if he didn't mind, I'd like to move to LA. So my dad got me an apartment in Inglewood, California. And a lot of people think, that's down by the Forum. And was it different in 1976? And I said, not a bit. That's all my dad could afford. And so that's where I was.
That was pre-Magic Johnson. So, not so great back then, right?
Yes, it was. So I always loved fitness. And I had somebody who lived in the complex, and he asked me if I wanted to go to the gym. And I said, sure. So I got a chance to walk into the second location of Gold's Gym in Venice. Walked in and met some really amazing guys. Couple that are still here. Robbie Robinson was the first guy I ran into. Robbie was, he's done everything in the industry, and just nice to me. He was just saying, hey, Tom, if I can help, let you know. Ran into some other characters. I mean, I worked out with Arnold, and we're not best friends. I don't have his cell number. I was a young teenager, and I was just, I was insane, and I was driven, and that's the thing that kept the old guys going.
People want to know, though, do you have an Arnold story?
Arnold stories are too much. I got one Arnold story because later in my career, I was a host on ESPN Muscle Magazine. I was one of the first season hosts.
Wow. I forgot about that show. That's going way back.
Yeah, I was a host. And there was a guy named Lou Zwick. Lou was the producer. And we were at Worlds one day because a lot of the Golds guys early on, Joe Gold sold it to a guy named Ken Sprague, which in turn sold it to my friends Pete Grimkowski, Tim Kimber, and Ed Connors. I'm still in great contact with Ed. They have a book out called The Three Musketeers about the early days of Gold's Gym. They're the ones that really took it nationwide. But Joe Gold kind of got upset that he sold his name, and he started a gym called Worlds. So all the old school guys went to Worlds. That means Arnold and Franco and Frank Zane and all the old guys. They all went to the Worlds. So if you wanted to work out with Arnold, you had to go to Worlds. So we were training calves, and there's an upstairs calf machine. We walked up there, and Arnold didn't like to wait for anything. And if he hears the story, he may not remember it, but I do because because it affected me more than him, because I was at the beginning of my career. So Lou was doing calves. And as we walked up there, Lou was doing calves, and Arnold goes, Lou, so you go to the beach. Do you walk on the beach without your sandals on? And Lou goes, yeah. I can see Lou's mind's kind of thinking, where are we going with this story? So I'm just a young kid, but I'm working for Lou. And he goes, so when you go on the beach, Lou, with the sandals off and you walk on the sand, do you sink up to your knees? And what that meant was Lou didn't have any calves. So there wasn't anything to stop Lou from, and Lou looked at him, he goes, Arnold, do you want to use the calf machine? And he goes, that would be nice, Lou. And so we kicked him off. And later I went up to Lou and I said, hey, Lou, I'm sorry, that's just him. And a lot of people around him know that. And Arnold's a great guy, but everybody's got the stories. I mean, there again, I was fodder for the fire. So, I mean, basically I was the early morning guy that would come in, and I was strong. I was young. Arnold was at the tail end of his career, and I used the younger guys. A lot of the younger guys will come in as older guys. When I got older in my career, I just say, hey, you want to work out? Because I needed their energy. I needed their spark. My flame had kind of died out. I had a 10-year run, which in bodybuilding is a long run. I mean, the people are doing it longer than I did, but I had a real, there's an underbelly to that industry. I mean, it's Hollywood, especially in the 80s. When I walked into the Gold's Gym in 76, pumping iron didn't come out till really 78. So muscles were still kind of a cultish endeavor.
I was just going to say, no, I do recall that. I grew up in the 80s, right? We were, as athletes, it wasn't that big a deal to get in the gym. It wasn't, not like it is today. But how did going down that kind of career path as a professional athlete, how did that affect your life?
Well, I ended up kind of more of a business deal in a marriage, because I was under contract with Joe Weider, who owned the industry, and I was a young guy. The one thing that they noticed when the market took off, when they realized that if Hollywood needed muscles, they would come to us. I did a lot of calendar work and print work, but they had to come, but they needed to change the culture, because the culture back in the 70s, early 80s, you'd go to a Gold's Gym and people were looking in like this. Yeah. Because the people on the inside didn't really have a very receptive attitude for people coming in, because they were kind of, it was kind of a cult. I mean, I'm just saying that. I mean, my friends don't like me to say that, but it is. I mean, we the guys didn't want to share the weights. There was absolutely zero, if maybe one woman in the gym the whole day. Where nowadays you go in a gym and women are there. Right. I mean, I remember the introduction of women's bodybuilding, and it took the world by storm, and it is by no means what it looks like today. And so it was just a whole culture change, and the industry wanted to use a lot of us younger guys. There's a picture out there of me. I had a Porsche, and I had a, it's an egotistical industry, Mike. Sure, and so you've got the male alpha going on. You got the steroid rage going on. I was a steroid addict. I was doing everything, blood doping, growth hormone, every anabolic you could, just because that's what I was shooting for. But it took my marriage down a rat hole. I mean, everybody wanted to be around muscle. So when Gold's Gym went to its location now, which is over off of Hamilton and Lincoln, and then pumping iron came out, and everybody's like fascinated. Everybody came to the gym. I used to tell people my friends were prostitutes and professional athletes, because we all kept the same hours. And we were all at the gym during the day when everybody else was working, And a lot of us worked at night. I mean, a lot of my gigs were at night. I was
Yeah.
flying I was one of the first guys that had a manager. There was 3 of us, Barry DeMay, Gary Stridham, and I. We had a guy named Marty Demersion. I don't know where Marty is now, but he had a company called International Sports Management, and he wanted to dabble into athletics in bodybuilding, and it was a bad deal. He said, so there was a lot of newness and no one knew what to do with it. I mean, those days you couldn't go out and get a Tom Cruise on a cycle and get him to have 16-inch arms. You want a 16, 20-inch arms, you had to come to us.
Yeah.
So the industry was kind of crazy, turning around. So what that did is that led to a lot of infidelity in my life. There was a great girl that got drugged through to be a bodybuilding widow. I did a show guest posing, and I worked it around my honeymoon. my ex-wife.
That's not a good idea.
I went to Hawaii and did a gig, and I had my best man who was there, and he knew Arnold and stuff. So we all went, and I did a bodybuilding show, and she just, after we were divorced, she said, I knew we were screwed up when you left to go the day after we got married to do bodybuilding. I go, honey, you knew what I did. So
it's interesting. You were talking about ego. I mean, I got to imagine at that level of athleticism, when you're building your body in that way, that's got to take, and of course the steroids don't help, right? That inflames everything. That's just got to take over your mind. Like, I got to get to the gym. It's just got to take over everything.
It's your purpose.
Yeah,
it really is. And I believe that purpose fuels passion. I believe purpose is the input and passion is the output. I think Simon Sinek has coined that.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But I believe that was my purpose. That was my whole drive in life. Pete Grimkowski, who was the president of Gold's Gym, got me a belt. Well, no, he got a belt buckle for me, and it said Mr. America. He goes, Tom, just put the date on it. And I never did. I wanted to be 2 things. Of course, you grew up in California. Back then, Gold's Gym in LA is the mecca of bodybuilding. 2 things you wanted to be: Mr. California, and you wanted to go on to be Mr. America.
Yeah.
And that was just everybody's dream. Everybody came to California to do that. And I did it. And I remember, I'll never forget this, Mike, and I tell people this. I thought, I was waiting for the feature of Muscle and Fitness to come out with declaring my current victory as Mr. California, some photos, just that's kind of what you're shooting for.
Yeah.
I did a lot of photo shoots of my teens and things. That's a whole nother story. So I was making a lot of money just in the magazines with print work way before the title. But I had a photographer, Mike, or John Bailey. He used to be an owner of Ironman. He told me once on a young photo shoot when I was a teenager, he said, Tom, he goes, we got enough pictures of you. Now you need to go out and win some titles. So I was like, oh, that's how we do this, And then my titles became the revenue of income through sponsors or promotion or guest appearances. And so as you did that, your life just kept going down a rat hole. I was traveling all the time. You're starting to realize this was an industry. I had to make money. How I placed was how I did. And so it was a whole thing. So I never did accomplish the America, but I did compete in the America. I did one thing that I'm really proud of. In the 87 Nationals, I went in drug-free. And I placed 11th in a class that was crazy. Sean Ray won the class, went on to have a great career. And I went in and I was doing growth hormones. So I tell people I was doing growth hormone, but I wasn't doing any anabolics. And what happened was, if you could place in the top 10 of your class, they were drug testing the universe that year. And so I was coming up and I had my drug test run. I had a great trainer, Glenn Birkenkamp. And as we were going there, I was testing. I had all the tests good. My levels were good. And I placed 11th. And so I placed 1 slot out of being able to be tested, and nobody in the top 10 went because they were all using. So I realized now, as I look back at that, Mike, I do believe that was God's hand at a time where I needed to leave. So that the day after that show, I called Joe Weider and I said, Joe, I'm out. He laughed because he said, Tom, everybody says that. And I said, no. The only thing I did that was smart, Mike, is that my dad, I never listened to my dad. My dad was a good man. He ran away from home when he was 11. So he didn't know how to do it. He was a truck driver. He left at 6 a.m., came home at, usually midnight. So my brother and I didn't see him. We didn't have a man influence in our life that taught us how to be a man. We kind of learned that on our own. And if you leave a man on his own, he's going to find the dark side. There's no doubt. So I'll never forget this. I'll never forget the first person to ever witness to me. And it was my manager, Marty Demersion. He drove up in his red Corvette outside of Gold's Gym. We had a meeting. Side note, I worked for Mattel, and I was He-Man. And in the 80s, the comic book and the cartoon was a sensation. They put it in the movies.
Yeah.
Mattel went out to hire us because we fit the role to open up the movies across the United States. So I did West Coast and up to Texas. They had a guy in mid the United States and then East Coast. But then I started going all the way to the East Coast. And so that was a whole different gig. But I'm just saying, so as you're doing these things, all that's happening. So Marty was going to meet with me about the He-Man gig because it was a fantastic gig. Wow.
Yeah.
The downfall was it though, She-Ra, which is, if you know the storyline, was with He-Man's sister, came from the Playboy agency. That wasn't good. That wasn't the wisest thing that they ever did for us guys. So as he picked me up, we got in the car, and Gary and Barry's from Holland, and Gary's from South Africa. We started realizing we weren't doing the weird stuff. When I say the weird stuff, of course we're going to attract people who have a same-sex attraction in bodybuilding. That's what the sport was kind of known for, but it didn't invade the sport. It really didn't. I have so many friends that have a different lifestyle than I do. And hey, the way I believe we all get 75 years on the earth, they want to live that way. They got to suffer consequences. I'm not the gatekeeper of heaven.
Yeah, that's right.
I can tell you one of the procedures that are going to be better for you. So my manager pulled up. We noticed we weren't doing the weird stuff anymore. And so I sat there, and Gary had called me and Barry, and they said, Tom, what are you doing all the weird stuff? And I go, no, I'm not. And so Marty pulled up, and we were going to lunch, and he's driving. I go, Marty, we're just worried that there's something wrong with this because, hey, no problem, but we're not doing some of the questionable things, the shadier things. And Marty goes, Tom, he goes, I've accepted Christ into my heart, and I can't have you guys exposed to that stuff anymore. And
what was your first thought when you heard that?
I was blown away because I knew Marty's behavior had changed. So did Barry and Holland, and so did
visibly.
Gary.
So you guys know this guy. There's something different about this guy, right?
And so Marty was big in the industry.
Yeah.
And so he just says, I can't do that anymore. He goes, Tom, do you want to know about Jesus? And I said, nah, that's good. But I felt God tapping on my shoulder.
Yeah.
So when I was in 87, and that happened probably in 86. And so in 87, after the Nationals, I called Joe and I wanted to be out. The only thing I did, I started there and I got down a rabbit hole. The only thing I did was I listened to my dad. My dad says, Tom, this isn't real. And I would always had daddy issues. So I threw it in his face and I said, Dad, you want to see my money? I throw my money. I had cars. I had a brand new 280Z, and I parked it in front of his house just to show him that I had stuff. And my dad sold my car. I don't know how he sold my car, but he just sold it. He goes, hey, where do I send the money? That car he goes, I thought you forgot about it, Tom. I had 2 or 3 cars. It's a lifestyle. But he goes, Tom, I want to tell you something. He goes, this isn't real. And I never realized that. So
your dad said that?
My dad said that. My dad said, Tom, this isn't real. Now, I want to show him all the material things, but my dad was talking with something deeper. And so he says, Tom, you need an education. So I got one. That's the only thing I listen to my dad. I tell people I'm a jock on the outside, but I'm a nerd on the inside. Went back to school and I got my bachelor's in computer science. Now in the 70s, universities weren't teaching this. I mean, we're talking 80 column Hollerith cards. You may know what that is, Mike. When you card punches in the old days with the computer input and output, but a lot of your audience doesn't know what an 80 column. You have to go to Smithsonian's to see those things nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
And so I did that, and I was able to get out, and I moved back home, a broken man with a divorce, a 27-year-old guy looking for a new career. So when I was back in town, I had a friend of mine that I lived with because I was having a house built in Bakersfield because I was, there again, I was just starting over. And there was an emptiness and a kind of a hollowness that I think a lot of men stuff everything into. And I stuffed drugs, women, and bodybuilding into that hole and found out it didn't satisfy. I tell people that are climbing that side of fitness, and now there's so many areas of fitness nowadays that people can get tied up in. I go, I've been to the top of the mountain, looked over there, and there's nothing there. You got some trophies, But at 64, I can tell you what is there. I had stage 4 kidney disease. I had a heart problem. I had a divorce that failed. I had an ego problem I didn't know I had. And so you have all these things, and that's where I knew it was empty, Mike. And I
well,
knew
what
Tommy.
point? You got all that stuff going on, right? Yeah. You're aware of it, but there's got to be a pivot point, right? At what point did you go, wait a second, there's got to be something more?
There was a lot of things going in my mind, Mike, because I knew Tommy was screwed up. I knew that. It was obvious to me, and it wasn't obvious because I didn't have money or things or opportunities. I mean, I backed out of my career. I call myself the underachieving Mr. California. So everybody's coveted that title and they went on to do much better things than I did. But what I saw is that I took a move lateral to go upwards. I left the sport. And a lot of people thought that I had more to do. And I knew inside I was done. I was drained. I was drug out. There's an underbelly to bodybuilding and fitness and Hollywood. And when you mix them all, you can get lost and go down a rabbit hole. So I knew I screwed up. But a lot of people, because I got into lifting and athletics because I have a speech impediment. I was diagnosed in when I was 7 in second grade. A lot of people don't remember the little carts that came around. We were in elementary school and they tested your ears and your speech. And with my lisp, the minute I hit 6 and 7s, they would put me in special classes. So all my friends would always tell me, "There goes Tom. We'll see you in a month," because I didn't realize it, but it's really more of a mechanical issue with my mouth because I'm a tongue thruster. So I have a lisp, but it sent me down a rat hole that I wasn't good enough.
Yeah. How did that exactly?
I was in.
How did that affect you?
I was in special classes.
Yeah.
And when they realized it was just my speech issue in the 60s, they weren't working on this stuff, Mike. And so my wife is a superintendent of school district. And she goes, "Tom, you just got lost in a system that didn't know what to do with you back then." So when I got into bodybuilding, I really didn't want people to come close to me. Flex Magazine did an article on me one time. And it's back when the Walkmans were popular. And I had a Walkman on and we were doing an in-gym interview. And they said, "Well, what music do you listen to?" And I looked around and I go, "Honestly, there's no music in there." So I open it up and they go, "Why don't you listen to music?" I go, "I just don't want people to talk to me."
Ooh.
I have a list. So I had to overcome that some degree. When I became a host on ESPN Muscle Magazine, I started getting some success and I needed to start speaking at seminars.
Yeah.
And so I started taking speech classes, learned a lot about myself, learned that I wasn't dumb. I wasn't retarded. I wasn't special. I just had a motor and a mechanics issue that could be fixed. And so I started walking through that. But I had a few issues with myself. So as I was progressing through all this, my first career, I thought I would be big and I would intimidate people, which I did, but they wouldn't want to come near me. I ended up having fans. And so I started getting things pulled out of me, which I thought were a holdup. But I never forget one night I was sitting on a Saturday night. We used to go out and, my buddy and I would go out drinking and that kind of stuff. And I had a desire to do something different, and it was to go to church. Now, with my family, it's weird because we never had a knowledge of that. My dad made a very emphatic impression on us: no religion. Religion's no good. It doesn't work. It's a bunch of baloney. And so I just knew that there was something I needed, and I thought maybe it was there. So I didn't know how to go to church. My buddy said, "Hey, what church you want to go to?" I go, "Well, we probably need to start calling them because we're good people. They're good people. We're bad people. They don't want us in there. We probably got to go some classes,
Yeah.
I had already been, I already had an anger issue with my anabolic steroid use.
Yeah.
Because I was ordered to go to a couple of anger management classes. And so I knew that I had an anger problem, and there was something else I couldn't do is I couldn't kick anabolics. Now that was something I never thought I would be stuck on after I made money with my muscles. I used to always laugh at people who took anabolics and didn't make money. I go, you're risking your health. I knew that part. I had great doctors back then. I mean, Joe Weider made sure I got taken care of.
Sure.
But we knew that it was causing us health problems. I mean, I knew with my blood doping that wasn't normal. That wasn't good. And so as I knew all this thing wasn't good, I just couldn't kick it. So what I did is I went on a cleaner drug. I went on a drug called Anavar and Escalene, which is both drugs for a pig and horses. I mean, that's how deep your mind goes down the rabbit hole.
Right.
And you're figuring out the dose. You got a 1,200-pound thoroughbred takes this much equipoise. How much should a 240 man?
Well, when you're an addict, right? You're addicted to something. You don't care how you get there. Doesn't matter.
But I just knew I couldn't kick it because it was who I was. So I tell people that I went to church one day and we were there, and the person came out and he goes, you know what, I screwed up this week. If you give me 50 minutes, I'm going to show you how not to screw up. And I looked at my buddy, I go, I haven't heard that yet. And I go, I got 50 minutes because I've been trying to figure this out. And so he shared Christ. And, of course, he talks about salvation, and all of a sudden I'm like, that's the key. But I still had the ego, and I was like, but I'm not going to do it in here, And so it took me 3 times before I finally did it, raised my hand, and doggone it, he said, that's not good enough. I need you guys to get up and come to the altar. And I go, there ain't no way I'm doing that. For the last 3 weeks, that's all he's wanted. I go, I'm not getting up. But I had this pull on me, Mike.
Yeah.
That was like, and I did, and I got connected with an old friend who was there. He was the pastor, and so I got in there. But in the meantime, I was a corporate VP for an agribusiness firm, international. So I was doing well, and I'll never forget this because people go, "Does it make a difference even in the corporate world?" I said, "Absolutely." Because when you're in the ministry, and I've been in the ministry 26 years now. This is my 3rd career. I've had 10 years in bodybuilding. I had 16 years in the corporate world, and I'm now 27 in the ministry. Started, like, people try to figure that out. I started in bodybuilding when I was 17, 18 years old, and I've been working ever since. But in the corporate world, I had a location here in Bakersfield, California. It was our corporate headquarters for Sunworld. And I had a little operations manager. She was from Alabama, named Diane Bailey. And we're friends on Facebook, so she'll see this. She came in my office, and about 10 employees from this location came in, and she goes, we all want to know what you all have done to change. And I looked at him, I go, is it that evident? And she goes, yes. I go, well, I've accepted Christ. She goes, I told you all that. And they walked out. And I said, no, Diane, hold on. I go, hold on.
Nobody wanted to know anymore?
I go, is it that evident? She goes, it is. And so I realized, I didn't even see a drastic change. It just became subtle. So Mike, I like working with men now because I've got a heart for that, because men are we're built a weird way. We just really are. Our ego is the first thing. What does the Bible say? Pride comes before the fall. Yeah. Humility comes before exaltation. So that's my story that got me to the point where now I've been there. I ran into a friend the other day. And you know how people lose time, kids grow up, and I saw him. He goes, hey, Tom, I haven't seen you for a while. I go, yeah. He goes, so you still doing that church thing? And I go, oh, you mean be in the ministry? I go, yeah. He goes, how long has that been? 5, 10 years? I go, let's try 27 years. And wow. He goes, well, I guess it worked. I go, oh, dude, this is a lifestyle. This isn't a fad, but everybody felt it was a fad because I had given that impression before. I had chased these other things. And stuffed them into my life, and it took me, I would say, Mike, probably 3 years to untangle myself, from everything that I had been in. I now the remarkable thing is with my anabolic addiction, I started knowing who I was in Christ, which is what gave me a new identity, which allowed me to lose the imagery that I had, because I tell people bodybuilding or fitness is the only sport you can wear.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because that whole area of identity is something men get lost in big time. And I have to imagine, because you're a physical beast, you're a physical specimen. That's what people see. Obviously, they can't see what's going on in the inside. Nobody can see what's going on in the inside of any of us. But when you're built like you were, that's a whole different thing. And that's how people begin to identify you. So how did you take all that and go, wait, I'm a beloved son of God. I'm not that guy.
Well, when it starts, it is the thing that fuels it, because, everybody wants big biceps. Everybody, there's two things that I can do, and I have genetics. And so you tell people, bodybuilders are born, they're not made, because you need genetics, and then you see how far you can go in them.
Right.
But the bigger you got, when I was living in LA, I didn't realize how much of a freak we were, until I'd come back to my hometown, and, you'd work out in the gym, and you're like, lifting so much more than everybody else, but you're so drug aided because you have the best, especially when somebody's invested in you, you're getting the best. And I was fortunate to do that. And so as you do get larger and bigger, you get freakier, and that becomes who you are, because people look at you like a freak. I mean, I got a haircut one time, and I had a stylist there on Cannon Drive, a block off of Rodeo, and Arnold came out, and everybody wanted a commando cut. And so I kept bugging him for it, and he finally did it. I remember walking out of his shop, walking down Cannon, made a left, walked west to Rodeo, and people kept walking by me, and they would glance at me. They would kind of side stare. That wasn't different for me back then, because my biceps were 21 inches, my legs were 34 inches. You're this big beast. In the 80s, we have this loud clothes. I had a clothing line called Tommy T's. We had the balloon pants. It was just, and so you were a sight to see in LA even. And so, but I would turn around and look at people, and they were bent over laughing at me, because I looked like that cartoon character that has a little tiny head and the enormous body with this commando cut, which my hairstylist, Bill Bologna, didn't want to give me, but he finally says, "Fine, Tom, you want it? I'm going to give it to you. Live through it." That was the hardest haircut I ever outgrew, because when I look at myself, we knew we were monsters, and that was our identity. So fast forwarding, when I started coming off the anabolics, people don't realize when you start doing those things, that's not really who you are. That is a fake identity, and people are going to lose that. And I know I have so many friends that are older, still using anabolics and whatever they want. That's their business, but they still haven't got peace with who they are. And I think two things will force you to get peace with who you are: age and your health. I always tell people, if you don't take care of your wellness, you're going to have to make time to take care of your illness. So when I was told I had stage 4 kidney disease, I was like, what? My doctor goes, "Tom, you've tried to kill your kidneys all your life. Good, congratulations, you achieved it." But I was able to work through it, and I'm at a stage 2 now, no dialysis or that kind of stuff, but it's all my anabolic use. But the biggest thing was looking in the mirror and seeing that who is looking back at you is not who you've grown up with. I went from a 5X shirt, and I'm married to a wonderful girl, Tiffany, and we have 2 beautiful daughters. And my wife was throwing away some old stuff, because we have some of my old stuff. It's all up in the attic. And she goes, "Do you want to keep these 5X shirts?" I go, "No, I'm never getting back into 5X clothes." And so I go, "Let me try one of those on." And I did. And I was like, holy smokes, that was who I was. But my wife told me, she goes, "I like this version of you better than that."
Well, let's talk about that. Get into that a little bit. So, you're a little like me now. You're chasing the hearts of men. How do you take what you've learned about that whole world of identity, which is more or less the false self, right? The mask that we wear. How do you help guys now understand their true selves and whose they really belong to? How do you transition that based on your life experience?
Well, I still realize, and I will say this always, that we all have an area of influence.
Mm-hmm.
I ran for mine for a long time, Mike, because I
thought that was a masculine rite of passage.
Yeah, I wanted to run from it, and I realized that, when I'm finding out more about God, he likes to use those areas. My first Bible study I ever did, I wanted to do a Bible study, and I wasn't on staff, and I did it, and I I just advertised in the church bulletin and from the pulpit. And I didn't do it. Other people said, hey, Tom's going to do a Bible study. So the first time I remember making cookies and waiting for it, and no one showed up. And I was like, why didn't nobody show up? So I did it the second week. No one showed up. Did it the third week. No one showed up. I'm just eating cookies now. And I'm like, man, what am I doing? And I felt God told me, Tom, you're fishing in the wrong pond. You have an area of influence at the gym and in fitness. So I never forget walking into the gym that night, and a guy walked up to me, an old musclehead, and said, hey, what's this thing you're having on Thursday night at your house? I go, well, I'm not having nothing because no one shows up. And he goes, what? He goes, I'll come. And I go, in my mind, I'm going, I don't know if I want you. I was like, this is for good people. It's not for you guys. Because I was still messing around with this idea. So I ended up starting that. And Mike, it was probably the craziest Bible study I ever had, because I ended up about 60 or 70 guys in my house, just all gym rats, muscle heads. And it was one of the neatest things, because I remember all of them were following in the same hole I did. One with ego, one with pride, and they were still chasing it at different ages. And so we all found Christ together. And so I always felt that, men are searching for something. They have to have somebody that has an influence in their life. So when I find influence in somebody's life, I try to just be myself, because that question will come around. I just try loving them. I mean, Jesus said, consider others more important than yourself. So a lot of people will start asking me about working out and stuff. And I've lost all my edge and things like that as far as knowledge. And so I'll just take them to what I do as a 64-year-old man. I'll tell them what I do, and they'll talk to me about anabolics. And I'll actually tell them, I go, hey, if you want me to help you with anabolics, I will. And they go, oh, you'll help me with that? I go, you're going to do them, not me. I go, you might as well do them right if you're going to do them. And so it gives me an opportunity to speak into their life and show them how stupid it is. That's where I'm going the whole time. I'm not saying, yes, that's okay. I'm just saying, why are you doing it? Now, I'm trying to get back to their why. That's Simon Sinek's thing, the why. So as I talk to guys, there's always a deficiency, and it's always self. Men are made. Well, there again, I work for first responders now in a nonprofit we have, and there again, this thing called testosterone is such bondage to men. It is, and it hits us young. Oh my gosh, it hits us young, and it chases us. And we all are taught, and I think, and what I love to see is when men have it right. Their identities in Christ with whoever they are, they're fulfilling what they feel they're called to be. I love it when guys work out, and I love them to see the gains they can make. I've got a guy in our life that helps us with a show called Muscle Matters, and his name is Steve Southers in town. He has a Sportslanders West nutrition store. Steve will sell people stuff that they need, not what they want. I mean, he'll sell the SARMs and SWARMs, but it gives them a chance to talk to them, like, why are you going that direction? Because I think when you talk to men, why are you going that direction? It's ego, it's maybe jealousy. I want to catch somebody else. I want to look like that. If I'm that, I'll be happy. And one thing I do know is that you're not going to push a man into something he doesn't want to do. And I think that's
no, it's really true. But we live in such a culture right now that we're all chasing these big houses. I was driving through a neighborhood in Atlanta the other day, and even I was like, whoa, wow. I won't tell you what area it was, Buckhead. So it just a really expensive, and even I go, I have no want or desire to have houses that big, or big, a car full of sports cars. I mean, that rabbit hole is long since left me, right? And I got to tell you, and this is what I try to tell guys. I mean, you want nice things. We all want nice things. I'm not suggesting not to go chase nice things, but when you get right in your heart, those things don't matter like they did before. They just don't, and I think that that's the conversation that we need to have with men more than anything.
We just got back from a big men's retreat. We had 500 guys up at Big Bear. And the one thing that I love about men coming together is you do come in with that alpha ego.
Yeah,
and they come in. And tattoos are real popular right now. So everybody's sporting tats and, just that kind of thing. A lot of people working out. And so I love to watch them come in because when they're around a bunch of guys, they're realizing that, maybe I don't have to prove something.
Yeah.
And I love to watch the progression through worship, teaching. And then I always tell the guys, because I did the last session at the last men retreat we're at for the chapel. I told them, I go, now it's important you don't forget what you've learned when you go down there, because you're going to try to grab on that, onto your old identity. You're up here. You found something that's giving you some freedom, because men, that's one thing I think is, I grew up in an era where you don't show your emotion. My dad had one word. My dad never cussed. But when my brother and I were complaining or crying, he'd say, buck up. That meant stop, stop what you're doing, because men don't do that. And when I came to Christ, God started to dismantle me and show me that I had a woman problem. And I was like, well, God, I really don't have a woman problem. I can get a woman. And God's like, that's the problem. It's the need for a woman that's the problem. I want the need to be fulfilled in me. And when I started learning that was my first largest accomplishment for getting on a road to healing, that God did have what I needed, and I had to rethink. The Bible says, and I go back to my programming days with MIS, Bible says that we renew our mind, that we can take this, what has been pressed in us, and renew our mind and become something new. And I think that's like reprogramming. Even the technology we have, we talked about being on one Zoom or another Zoom, they don't connect. So I always talk about, we can renew our mind in Christ Jesus, and we can renew our mind from being this man who's a womanizer, from being a steroid addict, from being egotistical, for chasing things that aren't real. It's so funny. I mean, when you look at trophies and stuff, and you're just like, dude, what did that mean in my life?
It seems a little shallow when you get right with God, doesn't it?
When you really put it in perspective. I have a lot of people say, well, Tom, you're a has-been. I go, oh, I was something? I'm like, that's nice for me. They're like, you're an old has-been. And I was like, well, at least, maybe I was something. But I'm more important now that I'm a husband.
Yeah.
I asked my wife to do something, Mike, and I don't know if you'll agree with me. Some people don't. But every year before a men's retreat, I asked her to grade me as a husband.
Oh, that's really it's risky.
Well, it is. But you know what? Men want to live risky, don't we? She's the only one qualified to do that. And my wife's an educator. She's a superintendent. So she always kind of pushes back on that. And I go, honey, I want to change. I want to be the best husband. I want to be the best man, father, employer, employee that I can be, pastor. I go, I need that. So it was the first night of the men's retreat. I sent her a text, honey, I need my grade. And she said something that then she tried to distract me. And I go, I need my grade. Don't distract me. So I knew I'd get there, and I asked her, please grade me on a curve, because I haven't had a great week. And so she said, B. And she says, Tom, I need you. I'm not a fixer guy. I've lost that gene. My dad didn't show me how. So I don't fix a lot of things around the house. My wife goes, I'm comfortable that's not who you are, but could you call somebody to fix it if you can? And
that's me, man. We got a lot in common.
I just told her, I go, I can do that. And if that's what it takes to be a better husband for her, why shouldn't I? I mean, she's my one flesh. So I tell people that. And so I that's the mode I am. I still want to be the best man. And one thing that I do know is men have to be together, because it says we sharpen each other like iron sharpens iron. That means there has to be sparks. Men have to be around men. And you've met Mike Harvey, our producer. Mike is one of those guys in my life. He likes to rub me the wrong way, but for my own good. It's not because he wants to see me fail. He wants to see me progress. And I'll tell you what, I don't think any of us are going to progress until we get out of this stuff right here. I always tell people, this stuff doesn't make it to heaven.
Well, so Tom, you just reminded me, I got to take out the trash, which means, we're gonna, and I hate to do it, we're going to have to wrap the show up. Tom, listen, we're going to put all your information in the show notes, but how can they get a hold of you and find out more about what you're doing and that type of thing?
My producer just handed me this, so I'll show you this. Touchstone.
There's a first on the show. Look at there.
dailyfreedom.org. When you have a producer that's one of your best friends and ministry partners, you get this stuff. But I need, Mike, that's what I love, to surround myself with young people. As men, I think we do need that Paul Timothy relationship, where we have older men that's pulling us this way, and we have younger men that we're able to pull along with us. And I think older men need to pour into younger guys.
Amen.
Because especially if they don't have fathers, and we're living in a fatherless generation. That's another topic. But if you're out there and you're a man, hey, pride comes before the fall. If you don't believe me, wait for the tumble. Humility comes before exaltation. And I'm just telling you, it's worth it. I wish I wouldn't have come to the Lord at 34. I wish I'd have come to the Lord at 14. I would have given up all that stuff for what I know now. Guaranteed.
Tom, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. And I say this all the time, and I kind of laugh about it because I'm 52. So I say to people, because I hear it all the time, honestly, if I had $1 for everybody that said, gosh, I wish I'd have known that when I was 20 something, I'd be an incredibly wealthy man. But, that's kind of something that we all have to go through. And it points back to what you're saying. If you're a younger dude, seek out a sage, right? And if you don't know what that is, pick up John Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart, and read about the man's stages of life. Okay. I got him off on a whole other topic.
Oh my God. That is one of my most favorite books for men.
Yep. So get it.
That is it.
There, yeah. So figure that out. Get with the sage, and that's something that I try to surround myself with, because I always say this: there are no shortcuts in life, but you can take a real quick U-turn with a good sage in your life. So Tom, absolutely wonderful having you on the show. I enjoyed it very much. I wish we had all day, but I don't know that anybody would listen that long. So.
Well, we're going to get you on our show, Mike, because you do a sensational job. People need to consume your content.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Tom. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
God bless.